This year, India and Pakistan lunged for each other's throats, and the entire world held its breath until the exchange between two nuclear-armed nations had passed. But when India and Pakistan engaged in the most recent exchange of hostilities across 4 days of back-and-forth air assaults, one nation sitting on the sidelines had more at stake than any other. To hear Beijing tell it, any violence between India and Pakistan takes place in China's own backyard, in part of the world where China calls the shots. If that is, China's own leaders are to be believed. But in the wake of the 2025 India-Pakistan conflict, it's now an open question whether China chose to put its finger on the scales and directly influence the outcome of the contest in Pakistan's favor. Not only that, but whatever successes Pakistan achieved, it accomplished through the use of Chinese military hardware, and by some allegations, with the help of Chinese intelligence. If China is destined to become the world's next superpower, it will begin by determining the outcome of conflicts in its immediate sphere of influence. And if Beijing truly did come to Islamabad's aid, then this serves as a clear indicator of what lies ahead in the battles to come. Inflammatory allegations. Regular viewers of this channel, or those following global geopolitics, are almost certainly familiar with the exchange of hostilities that began on May the 7th of this year in South Asia. But for posterity's sake, let's run through the basics. On April the 22nd, a terrorist organization in the disputed region of Kashmir killed 26 men, most of them Hindu civilians, in a resort town. India claimed that Pakistan was directly complicit in the attack and had supported the terror group that carried it out, although Pakistan has denied those claims. A couple of weeks later, India launched Operation Sindoor, a major response that drew Pakistan into back-and-forth exchanges of drones, missiles, and airstrikes. India and Pakistan reportedly engaged in a fairly large air battle, firing weapons at each other from long distance while staying safely behind their respective territories. Pakistan has claimed to have shot down no fewer than 6 Indian aircraft, including modern combat jets. India, in turn, claims to have destroyed the headquarters of terror groups in Kashmir, while both sides claimed that they hit each other's military bases and other military targets. As usual in modern warfare, both sides pretty interested in claiming victory. Neither would like to claim defeat, and neither is eager to open the floodgates to third-party fact-finders unless the other is going to do so as well. So, while the brief conflict ended without devolving into a major war and both sides appear to have gotten their licks in, it is difficult to determine a proper winner and loser here. Now, luckily, for our purposes today in this video, the question of who got the better of the other, well, that's irrelevant. Instead, we're focused on what happened behind the curtain, where we should be very clear from the outset, we're not going to be able to offer a rock-solid conclusion here. Neither Pakistan nor China has any incentive to openly admit they collaborated against India during this recent exchange, and as of the time of writing, no hard proof has yet emerged in the public domain. But that doesn't mean there's no reason to believe that China may have played a significant role. And on this occasion, we'll turn to India's leaders to explain the most direct allegations of all. The allegations in question were levied against China by Lieutenant General Rahul Singh, the Deputy Chief of the Indian Army, speaking to representatives of India's defense industry at an event last week. According to Singh, India was fighting against 2 adversaries in the recent crisis, not just one. Pakistan served as the primary aggressor, or what Singh referred to as the, quote, front face, while China provided, quoting again, all possible support. Specifically, Singh explained that China had provided, quoting him here, live inputs during the conflict, delivering real-time intelligence to Pakistan's forces about which Indian assets were deployed, where they were positioned, and how close they were to being used. Singh explained that China's involvement had become clear during high-level talks between Indian and Pakistani military officials who were trying to draw down the conflict. Quoting him again, Pakistan said that we know your such and such important vector is primed and is ready for action. End quote. In other words, China was telling Pakistan which of India's weapons were about to be used against it. Pakistan was directly informing Indian officials about its advanced knowledge of the military action that they had planned. Now, to be clear, this isn't the only allegation of Chinese involvement that has come from Indian leaders. Ashok Kumar, the Director General of India's Centre for Joint Warfare Studies, has specifically claimed that China moved satellites in orbit to help Pakistan deploy air defense radar to the correct positions in order to observe incoming military aircraft. China, of course, has rejected that claim, and so has Pakistan, with both nations insisting that Pakistan operated based on its own intelligence. Nor did Singh specify just how India figured out that China was feeding this intelligence to Pakistan, rather than Pakistan simply collecting that knowledge on its own. In fact, The claim even contradicts earlier statements by India that China hadn't helped directly and that Pakistan could have obtained commercially available satellite imagery to guide its actions. Nonetheless, there is reason to believe that Singh may either be telling the truth, or alternatively, he may be setting India up to challenge China more directly. Claims of military involvement in other nations' conflicts made against China directly are the sort of thing that's all but guaranteed to create major headaches in India and China's relationship moving forward, and they are something that India usually tries to stay well away from. This kind of allegation is not something that comes out of the mouths of high-level Indian military leaders unless the nation is ready for that sort of confrontation. But right now, it appears that India's about to square up. A potent partner. Alright, so there are some geopolitical incidents that we discuss on WarFronts where the truth is of absolute and utmost importance. But there are also stories like this one, where the thing that really matters isn't whether China actually lent its real-time military support to Pakistan, but whether the claim of Chinese involvement leads to a larger diplomatic showdown between Beijing and New Delhi. And on that front, there's reason to start paying attention oh so quickly. The relationship between China and India has never been a simple one, and now more than ever, there's reason to believe that trouble lies ahead. We've already referenced China's potential to become the next global superpower, standing opposite the United States and perhaps even rising to eclipse America on the world stage. But India is a rising powerhouse in its own right, with a booming economy, growing relevance in global affairs, and the only population on the planet that can rival China in sheer numbers. If India exists in China's geopolitical backyard, then as a next-door neighbor, it's less like a sweet old lady than a standoffish and highly competitive guy who may or may not keep a baseball bat by his door. China and India only recently de-escalated a 4-year-long dispute over their 3,500-kilometer border. But ever since India's conflict with Pakistan, New Delhi has been sending clear signals that it's ready to fight over a new set of issues. Just in the span of the last 2 weeks, India has taken several bold steps. It has accused China of directly supporting Pakistan, as we've mentioned, promised to offer safe harbor and political backing to the exiled Dalai Lama, called out China's growing closeness to Indian neighbor Bangladesh, and proposed a plan to challenge China's near monopoly on rare earth metals. Just a few weeks ago, let alone a few years ago, India poking at China so rapidly and in so many different directions at once would simply have been unthinkable. But add the context of direct Chinese support for Pakistan's military endeavors, and the decision begins to make more sense. India is growing rapidly, but it's not yet ready to challenge Beijing outright for dominance in Asia. With China appearing more focused on the United States, Russia, and international development efforts, India could try to keep relations fairly calm with its powerful neighbor. However, in a hypothetical situation where India had received direct evidence that China was backing its arch-rival, well, that would change the game entirely, wouldn't it? If India were to believe that China had already chosen its side in South Asia's decades-long conflict, then it's not much of a leap to see how India would decide it's time to show China its strength rather than its willingness to cooperate. When we shift the question from did China directly support Pakistan against India to did China have a side that it preferred in the India-Pakistan conflict, the answer to that question is a clear and unequivocal yes. China and Pakistan maintain a very close strategic and economic relationship, with China supplying a large portion of Pakistan's modern military equipment while simultaneously running large-scale industrial and resource extraction projects on Pakistani soil. These operations don't always proceed smoothly, but China and Pakistan have more than proven that their collaboration can withstand intermittent setbacks. When it comes to military engagement specifically, Pakistan's value to China is unmistakable. In this most recent exchange of hostilities, the performance of Chinese fighter aircraft and air-to-air missiles has taken on a level of international importance. Pakistan alleges that Chinese-built advanced J-10C fighters were responsible for downing several copies of France's Rafale from India's arsenal, and with the help of China's unproven PL-15 air-to-air missile. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar openly admitted to his nation's parliament that he called the Chinese ambassador and his team to Pakistan's foreign ministry in the early hours of the morning to keep them apprised of real-time developments that supposedly made the Chinese delegation quite happy. According to the Associated Press, China has been using those purported air-to-air victories to forcefully lobby other nations against buying France's fighter jet, urging them instead to place large orders of Chinese fighters. According to French intelligence officials who spoke to the AP, China has been actively cultivating disinformation campaigns to harm the reputation of France's jets while promoting China's own. As a retired senior colonel from the Chinese military told the BBC, quote, "The aerial fight above Pakistan was a big advertisement for the Chinese weapons industry. Until now, China had no opportunity to test its platforms in a combat situation." End quote. For China, supporting Pakistan's military directly would confer several benefits simultaneously. For one thing, it would allow China to do exactly what it claims to have done: battle test and prove the worthiness of some of its more advanced military hardware, while simultaneously avoiding direct conflicts that don't occur at a time or place of its own choosing. China is trying to cement itself as a major arms exporter and overcome past reports of shoddy workmanship and poor product quality in some of its earlier fighter aircraft. For another, supporting Pakistan would offer China the chance to better protect its own economic interests in the country and ensure that India couldn't meddle there in an effort to undermine China. And perhaps most important of all, by directly supporting Pakistan's military, China could ensure that India remains tied up in a prolonged hot and cold conflict against Pakistan for the long term, freeing China from having to ever worry about India as a direct rival. That's a dynamic that we've seen play out in other ways during various great power conflicts, with the Soviet Union funding and supporting Cuba right on America's doorstep during the Cold War. Pakistan, with China on its side, is far more capable than Pakistan trying to fight alone. Pakistan's capabilities in intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, or ISR, are believed to be relatively weak when it comes to gathering real-time actionable intel. China, by contrast, is believed to have the ability to keep watch over large parts of the world simultaneously. China brings a similar advantage in information and cyber warfare, where it's already known to offer technologies and capabilities for Pakistan's benefit. China obviously supplies advanced warfighting equipment to Pakistan that Pakistan isn't capable of producing by itself. Pakistan is clearly willing to use this equipment against a relatively modern peer adversary that China would rather not have to fight directly. This makes it far easier for China to oppose India through a willing and well-armed proxy than through a direct war that China very clearly does not want. As for what China could have provided Pakistan during this most recent conflict, the most likely answers are exactly what Lieutenant General Singh specified: warfighting equipment supplied ahead of time, and then the requisite knowledge to put that equipment to good use. Taking sides in Asia. So did China really assist Pakistan directly in its war against India? To put it simply, the jury's still out on that. India says yes, China and Pakistan say no, and the rest of the world shrugs its shoulders in public while keeping any secretive intelligence findings secret. But it would be certainly in China's interest to ensure both a neutral to favourable outcome for Pakistan instead of a defeat, and an ideal set of circumstances for Chinese military kit to be put to the test. China's preference would certainly be to provide intelligence and hardware instead of contributing its own fighting forces or formally entering the fight. And Pakistan would certainly be glad to take all the help it could get from its close ally. If India were to know that China had directly supported Pakistan in an armed conflict, then India would need to think oh so very carefully about whether it was time to stop appeasing China and start looking back. If it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, and swims like a duck, well, we still can't confirm it's a duck based on publicly available information. But what do we suspect? I mean, quack quack. As for how China could lend its military support to Pakistan in the future, any direct involvement will likely resemble what India claims to have happened here. Beijing is known for being extremely militarily cautious on the world stage. It doesn't conduct invasions, it doesn't engage in armed interventions, and it doesn't even fight full-scale wars against its adversaries if such conflicts can be avoided. If China can ensure that Pakistan has the tools to fight its own battles against India while feeding it the necessary information to make those efforts more efficient and effective, then China doesn't need to worry about a large-scale war with India in the near future. As long as Pakistan remains militarily potent, India and China are unlikely to engage in any military conflict larger than a border skirmish, and that means China can delay the chaos and consequences of war while amassing its capital and power in the ways that Beijing prefers. For South Asia, this dynamic likely means that the India-Pakistan conflict won't be going away for at least several decades more. India has the economic power to manage its own side of the conflict, plus a growing relationship with Western powers. Pakistan was more likely to fold at some point, whether through economic pressure, regime change, or other means, but China has both the economic power to ensure that Pakistan can hold its own in the coming decades, and the incentives to ensure that India continues to regard Pakistan as an adversary. Granted, the mere fact that an India-Pakistan Cold War will continue doesn't preclude India from growing into the geopolitical major power that it could become. However, it does impose meaningful constraints on India when it comes to the question of how India will realize its potential. India's relationship with China could grow more competitive, more oppositional, and even outright hostile. But if China is going to be helping Pakistan in its battles against India, then any direct face-off between India and China will have to be postponed indefinitely. Thank you for watching.